Welcome to the Making Waves at Sea Level podcast with your host, Tom Singer. In each episode, we will explore the interesting stories of business executives, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders who are shaking things up and growing their companies. It is time to make some waves. Now here's your host, Tom Singer.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Making Waves at Sea Level. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are up to episode number 620, which this episode probably should have been episode number 420, and you'll find out why in just a second. But before we get started, I have to thank the first sponsor of this episode. So this episode is brought to you by Spectrum Reach. Now, Spectrum Reach, they know three things better than anyone. Number one, they know how to harness the power of multi-screen advertising. Number two, they know how to offer simplified one-stop shop destination for marketing solutions. And number three, they know what makes our cities and towns tick because they're our neighbors. They are the most trusted partner, a media partner in America. To find out more, visit them at spectrumreach.com. All right, so today I have Nick Kovacevic here with me on Making Waves at Sea Level. And Nick is making waves for his company and his industry because Nick works in and around the cannabis industry. But here's the weird thing. He works with ancillary products, meaning they make the packaging, the vape pens, and other things that help the cannabis companies deliver their product. And as you can imagine, and we've had a couple of other episodes with people who work in and around cannabis, that's an industry that has a lot of challenges. So Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Glad to have you here. It's kind of a small world. It turns out my father-in-law was Nick's high school Spanish teacher. So it's amazing what you can learn by just doing a LinkedIn search on somebody.
And I'm sad to report that I'm not fluent in Spanish.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure that's not my father-in-law's fault, Nick, but we won't go we won't go into that. So, Nick, tell us a little bit about your company, Kush Company.
Well, Kush Company, Kushco Holdings, we are actually pretty unique because we just celebrated on December 2nd our 10-year anniversary, which is rare for a company in the legal cannabis industry to be around for 10 years.
I was just going to say, we were joking before we got started that I also work for an executive search firm, and the firm is really well positioned in helping companies find key executives who work in the cannabis field. And it's interesting because we were joking about it's hard to go back and find somebody with 10 years experience who wasn't on the street corner, right?
Exactly. So I might be in demand now. So yeah, we started as really with the idea of picks and shovels provider. We knew that cannabis we believed that cannabis was going to become a sort of a gold rush or a green rush. And for us to position ourselves to sell the little widgets that everybody needs on a daily basis and without actually touching the plant, and keep in mind, 10 years ago, there was significant risk in touching the plant, even doing it in a medical legal state. You were still at risk of going, federal prosecution, federal raids, et cetera. So we like the positioning from that standpoint, less risky and reoccurring revenue because we're trying to capture a small piece of every transaction that occurs. And there's also a lot that has to go with, how scalable a business is. A plant touching business has a lot of red tape, not that we don't have red tape. So there was a lot of reasons that we liked being ancillary, and it's paid off. We've expanded the business tremendously. We have over 100 employees, do over 100 million in annual sales, and we're able to service companies all throughout North America.
So that's actually fascinating that 10 years ago you said, hey, let's get into this business. But California, it wasn't recreationally legal. There wasn't dispensaries open. There was just the medical part. And so it's interesting that you looked at it and said, okay, let's look out into the future. How can we navigate this? And you came up with this idea of doing, sort of the ancillary products. So describe what types of products you make. What do you do?
Yeah, so we started the company under the name Kush Bottles. And really because we had access to these child-resistant pop-top vials, which were similar to your traditional pharmaceutical vial, but different in our opinion, something that could really be more identifiable with this emerging medical industry, which isn't like your traditional, pharmaceutical medical industry, right? So something similar but differentiated. They were a little bit more cool. We could get them in all sorts of colors. And, we started building the portfolio around that. We added labels, to go on the vials. We noticed some people preferred, child-resistant bags versus vials. And so we slowly started to build out this portfolio, which today, if you look at our catalog, it's, thousands and thousands of SKUs, across a myriad of form factors. And the regulations for cannabis, you mentioned when we started, there were no regulations. The regulations have evolved state by state and even country by country. And we've had to adapt the product portfolio to meet and exceed those regulatory requirements in each of those markets.
So have you always been an entrepreneur? Were you like the guy in high school who had like a DJ business or something like that?
The funny thing is my business partner was that guy. We talked before the show. He was a DJ Dazzy D, and he was mixing it up for the Sweet 16 parties and the high school dances. And, we were best friends all through high school, played basketball together. And then in college, he started another business. It was a moving and storage business called Pack My Dorm. And when I finished my college basketball career, unfortunately, with an ACL knee injury, I was, recovering from surgery and had nothing but time on my hands to help my friend. And I ended up getting into business with him. We sold, long story short, we sold the Pack My Dorm business, and then used the proceeds of that to start Kush Bottles 10 years ago, which became Kushco Holdings just a couple years ago.
Nice. So it's interesting because in looking at your website, you guys do business in all the states that have both recreational and medical marijuana, and then around the world, in Europe and in other places. So when you started the business, did you have the vision that this was going to be such a global business that it's becoming?
No. It's funny because we didn't even think of it as a business. We thought of it as a hustle, right? We looked at the economics and we knew we could buy a container of these vials, at the time for about $25,000, and we could go door to door and sell, 3, 4, 10 boxes at a time to these these medical dispensaries that were popping up. And we could double our money and we could turn 25 into 50 grand. And then the idea was we could now go buy 2 containers and we could turn 50 grand into 100 grand and just keep it going. This is reoccurring revenue. So no, we didn't have an idea of, hey, we're going to build out this, ancillary business that's going to support this global regulated cannabis industry. It was really, hey, there's an opportunity here in California with these, emerging medical dispensaries. And, as a couple of young kids, fresh out of college, we could make a little bit of money. That's what we had on our mind. And, it turned out those early days was a lot tougher than we had thought. And we were fighting against, obviously, all the normal challenges that any startup business would have, but also, combine that with the fact that cannabis was federally illegal. And at the time, the federal government was coming in, raiding, shutting down and arresting our clients. We also had to battle local and county municipalities that were constantly trying to shut down these dispensaries. And it was tough. We were growing the business, but, there wasn't the free cash flow that we thought there would be. And, as a result, Dallas and I, we ended up having to go out and do other hustles and other side businesses, and led to us starting another company that's actually become very large over the last 8 years as well, a company called Big Rents that does construction equipment rental software. It's a marketplace. And we're actually gearing up to, expand that business via acquisitions, and there's a CEO and everything in place. So it's amazing that the industry did take off the way it did. And we recognized it at some point, right? When Colorado legalized, we saw that as sort of a, really it was a landmark sort of data point to say, hey, if this can happen in Colorado, it's likely to happen in other states. And we knew California was only a matter of time, which is the biggest state in the country. So we did get the vision at some point, but not at the very early days. I'd be lying if I said that.
So how long has California had it legal now for recreational?
So the medical law was 1996, and it took a while for that law, which actually was constructed to be more of a community co-op. Some smart lawyers turned it into a business framework. So that was 96, and really the dispensary started popping up in the early mid 2000s. And then, at some point it was basically a full-blown commercial industry, and they tried to regulate the medical market, but, it was right when adult use was getting popular. So they said, let's just skip that and we'll go right to adult use. It was approved by the voters in 2016, and it was implemented and rolled out January 1st, 2018.
So you've really seen this kind of like blossom and explode, at least in the California market, in the last couple of years. And now during that 2 years, so many other states have followed. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced? Because obviously I would guess the last 2 years have been heavy growth for you.
Yeah, we've dealt with the challenges of hypergrowth. We've dealt with challenges of cash flow, just like any business that's growing. Our sales went from roughly 4 million one year to 8 million to 20 million to 50 million to 150 million. So it was hypergrowth, and doing it with physical products, right? Not software that's scalable, and you add a few lines of code and now you can take on another 100 million. This is physical goods, right? If we wanted to grow sales, that meant we needed to buy more goods, we needed to import more goods, and we needed to sell more goods and physically transport those to our clients. So it was a big lift, and that was sort of the easy part, right? The hard part was the industry that we're in, what most businesses don't have to deal with. And these are things like, at one point we had 6 containers seized by customs because they were deeming them as paraphernalia. We ended up proving that they were in violation of a appropriations rider that protected these imports, and we got those containers back about a year later, which didn't make any of our clients happy, but at least we got them back and didn't lose that money. So we had things like that. We had things like losing merchant processing, getting your bank account shut down. This is personally and professionally, with the business, right? So our personal accounts, our business accounts, trying to find banks that would bank us. So all sorts of challenges that anyone that's been in the cannabis industry can tell you. But, at a more granular level, there was challenges, with our market. So as we mentioned in the medical dispensaries early days, we were selling packaging to dispensaries who were doing a deli style filling method. And so they would actually have a blank jar or vial or Kush bottle in our case, and they would have a mason jar style filled of cannabis, and they would then weigh out, a gram or an eighth in front of the patient. And then they would handwrite a label and put what strain it was and the quantity. And then they'd slap the label on, and then they'd throw that into a, RX bag, essentially a paper bag, and, off the patient went. All of a sudden, with the regulations coming into place, they determined that these products now needed to be pre-packaged and pre-sealed at the cultivation level, right? No different than if you're going into your local Whole Foods. There's a few bulk bins, but most of the goods are pre-packaged, pre-sealed, and pre-labeled. Your beef jerky, your snacks, your potato chips, whatever it is, right? So we kind of knew that was going to go that way. But again, all of a sudden, we have a robust customer base of dispensaries that are used to buying our products. Those are no longer our customers. Our customers are now moving to the growers who we had to quickly establish relationships with and figure out, unique selling points and product portfolio for that new demographic. So things like that just pop up, and all of a sudden, you've got to shift, and regulations have been shifting ever since Colorado legalized and regulated in 2014. They've probably changed their packaging regs a dozen times. So you have these products that you think are compliant and effective for that market. All of a sudden they're not, and you've got to find new products that are. So these types of challenges in a fast emerging market, but not to mention a highly regulated market, that's at odds. State law is at odds with federal law. So you have all these confluence of factors that create an ever-changing dynamic environment. As a business owner and entrepreneur, you're constantly adjusting and positioning and trying to keep growing throughout all of this.
So it's interesting. I interviewed the CEO of Wana Brands a couple weeks ago here on the podcast, and we were talking about the challenges of 10 years ago, and it was a lot of similar things, that they had even on the edibles side, of just the regulations changing and working in several states. Every state has different rules for her. But one of the things we talked about was getting started 10 years ago. It wasn't like at the PTA meetings, she could tell people necessarily what she did, because not everybody was on board. When you started the business, was this something that, maybe you didn't mention to grandma? I mean, it's probably different today, but what were some of the personal challenges that you had of saying, hey, we're going into this industry? Was there pushback?
Oh, absolutely. And Nancy is a true pioneer. I'm glad you got to connect with her.
She was one of the best interviews of 2020, without a question. You should go listen to that. She was fantastic.
I'll check it out. Yeah, big fan of hers and Wana. And, look, it certainly had a gigantic stigma. The stigma is slowly eroding. We still have a long way to go. Early days, you didn't want to tell people you were in the industry. We had the advantage of being ancillary. And I remember, going to family gatherings and people saying, your dad tells me you're now in the marijuana business, but you just sell the packaging. You don't actually touch the stuff, do you? You don't touch the plant. Oh no. God, no, we wouldn't,
we'd never try that.
Yeah. We never go that far.
That's the devil's weed.
Exactly. So, you had that, I was, fortunate, as I mentioned, we founded another company in 2012, and a technology company in construction industry. And so, a lot of times I'd say that, oh yeah, I got this, big rents company. You kind of leave the marijuana one out of it. But it was interesting because it all shifted shortly after Colorado legalized, say 2015, 2016. And it became something you didn't want to say at a dinner party or a family gathering, to something that you led with, because people were so interested and they just want to talk for hours about what was it like, what was happening, how things were, kind of developing in this, now, exciting, sexy market. Right. And, it shifted quickly, but it was still taboo. And, even when we became we were one of the first publicly traded companies, out of necessity. People think of these companies going public. It's not like your IPO where it's the culmination of, years or decades of efforts. It's, hey, you have no other way to raise money. You have to go public.
Because the banks can't lend to you. Is that right?
Exactly. The banks can't lend. The venture capitalists can't invest. Good luck getting private equity or institutional capital.
Although that has changed now.
It's starting to change. And, so as a public company, and I remember now a lot of other cannabis companies started going public a few years after us, and they're meeting with institutional investors, and the executives of these companies were telling investors, yeah, we think we can profit on this industry, but, we don't consume the stuff. And just think about, I just thought about it. I said, imagine being an executive at an alcohol company or a soda company and saying, hey, now we think we can make money off this, but we don't drink our products. It's like unheard of, right? So why such a stigma? And so I took the opposite approach, and I said, look, I want at least at my company, if people would feel comfortable gathering and drinking an alcohol beverage, they should feel comfortable taking a cannabis edible or even smoking a joint in a smoking area. And it's slowly starting to change, but we're nowhere where we need to be in terms of the destigmatization of cannabis, even though we're making a lot of progress on the legalization. So
come on, tell us the truth. Now, when you go to a family party, that uncle comes up to you and says, "Can you score me some?"
Yeah, everybody wants to try now. They're getting kind of curious.
So what advice do you have? I mean, you have a company that's, doing hundreds of millions of dollars, in sales. What advice do you have for someone who's starting a business that might be in an industry that's a little challenging, a little off the mainstream? What advice do you have for others?
I think the best advice is, be prepared to change, be prepared to adapt. What's the famous quote? No war plan survives the first battle, right? So you're gonna get out there, and things are gonna change, right? And you got to be ready to adjust. And so anybody that gets too married to one idea or one plan, they're gonna struggle. And you got to keep an open mind. You also be prepared to deal with, the fallout, right? And I mean that seriously, losing personal bank accounts, brokerage accounts, traditional financial institutions saying, we do not want to do business with you because of your affiliation with this industry. And I've heard even worse, fortunately it hasn't happened to me, but people losing their health insurance or their life insurance, because they're affiliated with the industry. So there's still that stigma. It's still federally illegal. You're going to have a lot of red tape. You're going to have a lot of risk, and you're going to have an ever-changing environment that you always constantly have to navigate. But on the flip side, you're going to have a hell of a lot of fun, right? It's a once in a lifetime opportunity to participate in something like this that's emerging from illicit to legal, and actually now with the pandemic, essential. Yeah. Where we've seen that designation almost unanimously for the industry. It's really exciting. And when you think about the healing component and the people that actually need this product, and that they can get off of opioids, it can help with pain management, with cancer treatment. It's very rewarding to be in this industry as well. So it never, I don't think, certainly in my life, but in maybe a generation, have we had something that on one hand it is so compelling, but on the other end is so challenging. And if you can find success, as you can imagine, it's very rewarding.
So it's interesting because you talk about essential. When the lockdowns all started mid-March, I remember a story, and I might not have it exactly right, but the gist of the story was that the Colorado governor was putting in some pretty strict rules about everything closing for like 3 to 4 weeks, and liquor stores and dispensaries were on the list. And like within hours, doctors had actually called the governor's office and said, look, we have enough problems with the pandemic. We don't want people freaking out with their anxiety. We don't want people detoxing from alcohol. That the dispensaries and the liquor stores, if you close them, you're creating more problems for doctors. And they reversed on that in a matter of hours. And I thought that was kind of a fascinating little headline.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I remember that. And we're seeing it now, right? The mental health fallout of the pandemic.
Well, that could be a whole other podcast. The mental health problems that have come up this year are harsh.
Been greater than a lot of the damage we've already suffered. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is a very viable, and important medicine for society as a whole. And it's great to see the misinformation being corrected, and people starting to really understand the facts, and starting to experience and actually, try the product and for various reasons and find success.
So, Nick, I've got a couple of more questions for you before I'm going to let you go. But first, I have to thank the other sponsor of this episode. So this episode, like all of them, is brought to you by Podfly Productions. Podfly, they take the time and the headache out of creating your own podcast. They set you up with the right equipment, training, and guidance to ensure you're going to sound amazing. Podfly does all the heavy lifting and that pesky technical work so that you can focus on creating great content, growing your audience, and interviewing really cool people who are making waves like Nick Kovacevic. Hey, if you want to start a podcast, and I know that some of you do, jump over to podfly.net/coolthings and check out the offer that they have for the listeners of this show, because they'll give you a little discount if you tell them you found out about them through this podcast. That's pretty awesome. So, Nick, your story of starting the business and everything, it's been a lot of fun to hear. And your advice that you have for people was spot on. So I always end the show by asking people, I used to call the show Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. So I still like to ask people from time to time, what's the coolest thing you're doing at the company right now? So what's the coolest thing going on with Kush?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, we are a publicly traded company, so I got to think about what I am allowed to say. We've got our little innovations that we work on behind the scenes that aren't out there. But honestly, one of the coolest things we're doing right now is we're rolling out a 401k plan, and that wouldn't be cool in other industries, but it's pretty rare in our industry, and we have a very young workforce, and so that's cool to be able to do that and have a program where the employer can match some of those savings and help people save for retirement. So that's cool. I mean, look, we've got really cool products that we're working on that we're bringing out. We've got some technology that we're working on to support our clients. Cannabis is such a big business now. You just think about the amount of products that are needed to support it, and we've got containers coming over from all sorts of countries every single day. And right now it's a crazy time to be managing logistics. If you've seen the ports, the ports are extremely backed up. So we've got some really cool technology that we're launching that gives our customers visibility into those shipments, the logistics, inventory levels, really helps them manage these types of supplies, which they're small when you think about the revenue. When you think about a product on a shelf, packaging is a very small cost, but it's integral, especially in a compliant, regulatory compliance industry. If you don't have your packaging, you don't sell product. Mm-hmm. So it's a small piece, but it's vital. And so being able to manage that part of the supply chain for our clients, they give that responsibility to us. It's a great honor. It's a great responsibility. But then being able to add tools to make it more collaborative and give them the visibility and the ability to manage it, it's exciting. And so we've got some cool stuff we're launching that our clients are already chomping at the bit to get into, and it'll only help our business be smoother and their business be smoother, and continue to get millions of marijuana packages on the shelves of cannabis retailers near you.
So what do you think the future is for the cannabis industry? You think all 50 states are going to make it legal? What's your prediction, if you can make one?
Oh, 100%. I think, it's just a matter of when, not if. I do a lot of work on these, on the legislative side of things. I was recently had an op-ed published on Fox News. I did an interview last week with Congressman Matt Gaetz, who was the only Republican co-sponsor the MORE Act, which just was passed in the House. That's the first time any branch of government has voted to legalize since marijuana became illegal in 1970. So 50 years, and we finally had a vote. Now that it's not going to pass the Senate at this point, but it is just a momentous occasion. We saw the UN just reschedule or deschedule cannabis. We see Mexico looking to legalize alongside Canada. So, you got Mexico legal, hopefully by Q1 of next year. Canada's been legal now for going on 2 years, and it's only a matter of when the U.S. finally gets it done. So a lot of momentum. We saw with gay marriage, it was a 10-year arc from when Massachusetts is the first state to legalize to when finally President Obama legalized it federally. And cannabis is coming up on that 10-year arc. When you think of Colorado, it was officially voted to legalize for adult use in November of 2012. And I think we probably have legalization somewhere around that 10-year mark, which would put us in 2022, if not sooner, just because things are moving a little faster. And we've seen that same level of public support. It's up to about 70%. So it's fascinating. For the industry, we just see growth everywhere. We've got new states coming online, New Jersey being the big one that just voted it in, Arizona, Montana, South Dakota, even Mississippi for medical. So there's no shortage of growth opportunity. And we're getting to that tipping point where it will become federally legal. And it's just a matter of how. And, you have a new administration coming into the executive branch that, Kamala Harris certainly supports legalizing, and President-elect Biden supports decriminalizing. So, so much wind at our sails, finally, after going through a couple tough years of ups and downs. And, now it seems like we have some tailwinds behind us, and it's exciting. I just told my staff today, it's never been more of an exciting time to be in this industry.
Nice. So the last question I love to ask everybody who comes on the show is, beyond your industry, where you're obviously making waves and doing some good stuff, beyond your industry, when you look out into the business world in general, doesn't have to be the world of cannabis, could be, who do you look at in a leadership role where you say, wow, she or he, they're the person who's making waves? Who do you admire?
Yeah, another good question. I think right now it's, there's a lot of really exciting stories. We just saw Airbnb go public, DoorDash. The Airbnb story is amazing. And those founders, the CEO, Brian Chesky, I mean, it's hard not to respect what they've done. And, at one point they were thinking of folding up shop and got into Y Combinator, and the rest is history. But a lot of work along the way, and they really believe in the value that they're providing to the community. So I think that's a great one, really relevant. But I read a lot of books. I'm a big fan of Elon Musk. Love what he's doing, and it's hard not to look up to him. And
he just announced that he personally is moving to Texas, and Tesla's building a big plant in Austin. So we like Elon here in Texas.
I know everyone seems to be leaving California, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oracle just a week or so back said that they're leaving. HP the week before that. So Texas, we'll take them all. If Kush wants to move to Texas, we'll take you.
Hey, you know what? Just get it legalized there for me, and I'm on my way.
All right. Well, that's good to know. We'll hold you to that when Texas legalizes it in 2097, I think. Texas might be your last state, but whatever. So
we'll see. If more Californians move there, it'll happen sooner.
So they're coming, man. They're coming, and I shouldn't mock that. I grew up in Southern California. My wife grew up in Northern California, and 30 years ago we moved to Austin because clearly we're visionaries. We did it before everybody else, but we're still here. So Nick, thank you so much for being a guest here on Making Waves at Sea Level. Any last words?
Well, my last words would be that. One of the things we've been really focused on is this idea of ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And it's popular. I'm not saying this for the first time, I'm sure, on your show, but I think it's more important than ever in the world that we're in that companies do take on this responsibility. We're doing a lot of initiatives as a packaging company. Obviously, the environmental piece is key. It's unfortunate the amount of plastic that we've put into the environment as a company, as an industry. And so we're working on compostable solutions that we do have some in the market today and more to come. And then on the social side, I mean, if we learned anything this year, it's that, there's a lot of social unrest in this country, and there's wrongs that do need to be righted. And as companies, especially leaders in industries, I believe you do have a burden to an onus to really create some of that change that you want to see. We're proud to have partnered with Mission Green, who's a leading group. The founder, incredible story. They've got a HBO documentary coming out soon. I don't know if it's HBO, but it's going to be a big documentary, and talks about how he was sentenced unfairly to 55 years in prison for dealing a very small amount of cannabis, and luckily got out early through a crazy heroic effort, bipartisan support, involved everyone from Snoop Dogg to the Koch brothers. And now he's made.
Now that's an interesting combination. That's a whole other talk.
Oh no, it's incredible. You got to see the documentary when it comes out. And now he's made it his mission to get others out We just saw the longest standing prisoner for marijuana released, I think it was this week or last week. And, we're very active in that partnership. We have an initiative called Children in the Community. And we raised, we got over 100,000 books as part of a book drive for kids. And we just completed that book drive. We're doing a lot of stuff. It's all on our website, kushco.com. There's a section called #KushCares, and you can read about all the things that we're doing. So, my last piece that I'd like to say is, encourage other companies to step up and do the same. If we all do our part, we can certainly make the world a better place. And I think the days of saying, hey, corporations are separate from social initiatives, you can't do that anymore, right? You've got to embrace it and find something that matters to you, matters to your industry, and go out there and do something positive for our country and for your communities at large.
Yep. And one of the questions, and we're out of time, but one of the questions I used to always ask guests is, what do you do to give back to the greater good? And one of the reasons is I think that companies, whether it's a solopreneur who works for himself or if it's a big multi-$100 million a year conglomerate, I think they all have to be thinking about, what do I do to give back to the greater good? So I fully agree with you. So Nick Kovacevic, thank you so much for being a guest here on the show. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. I say it every single week. If it wasn't for the audience, why would I do this podcast? I'll tell you what, I have been doing this show for over 6 years and now over 620 episodes. And we're not stopping anytime soon. So I do it for the audience. I learn a lot, but I hope you learn a lot. So come back every Tuesday and Thursday. We're here with interviews with people who are making waves, who are just as cool as Nick. And I know you're thinking, how are you going to get somebody as cool as Nick? But we do it every single time, twice a week. So go out there and flex your entrepreneurial muscles. Make sure your career ladder is against the right wall, because it sucks to climb to the top and realize you did it in the wrong place. And then while you're out there doing all this stuff, have some fun. Go have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Making Waves at Sea Level podcast. Without your listening to these in-depth conversations, there would be no show. Connect with Tom at tomsinger.com and follow him on Twitter and Instagram at tomsinger.